Hello everyone, this is about the v3.39.1 release. This time it's a bug fix release, so it only contains fixes on top of the v3.39.0 release. And some of them are pretty big, some of them are pretty small, but let's get started with the first one. For the firewall, we now delete chain rules by line number. Okay, this is a very deep oversimplification of a very kind of complicated problem. Okay, so the pull request is pretty big. It's more than 1,000 lines of changes. But first of all, I would like to just show you what the problem was with the previous release. So I'm going in a small terminal here, and we are going to run a little container. We're gonna name it Gluetun and give it net admin capabilities, and we're gonna use the Proton VPN service provider. Proton VPN. What else? We're gonna use WireGuard, and we are gonna use WireGuard, our little WireGuard private key, because we need one. All right, and we are going to use what else are we going to use? We are going to use VPN port forwarding, because the bug is pretty relevant if you use VPN port forwarding. It could mess up other things as well, but it is very reproducible and annoying if you use port forwarding. Okay, and we're going to use several countries such as Germany because it's next to me. It will go faster. And finally, we're going to run the previous Gluetun. So v3.39.0. All right, let's do it. Oops. Oh yeah, I forgot to set the VPN type to WireGuard. Oh, and let me add the log level to debug as well, so you can see all the firewall rules being run. There we go. Okay, it's setting up, apparently. Okay, it's healthy. Yeah, downloading the block list, blah blah blah. Alright, okay. So, port forwarding is starting once everything is set up pretty much. This is one of the last steps. And it says the port forwarder is 51000, which is a pretty round number. I like it. So the four rules it runs these. So basically, it allows port 5100. Well, actually, it's 51,000. Sorry, 51,000 to go on the input chain on the tune interface and through both TCP. So this is for TCP. This one is for UDP. And we have the same one both for IP tables and IP6 tables. So IP tables is just for IPv4, and IP6 tables is for IPv6. Okay. So in this situation, the bug is for both IP tables. So we will just focus on normal IP tables for IPv4, right? The IP6 tables has the bug as well, but anyway. Okay, so we have these rules. Okay. Now let me just reproduce the problem by faking the tunnel misbehaving. So we're going to exec in the Gluetun container in another terminal, and we are gonna set IP link set tune 0 down. So we shut down the VPN tunnel basically, right? So if we do that and we go back, it will complain. Oh, there we go. That was fast. Okay, so okay. Usually, like it is triggered by an unhealthy error, but in this case, the port forwarding kind of crashed as well. But basically, you have the same thing. I can run it again to show you again, I guess. Basically, the problem is this will crash. This is pretty much, I think, what crashed the thing. The entire Gluetun program. That's my point. If we try to remove the previously allowed port when we stop the port forwarding service, iptable says, "Oh, bad rule. Does a matching rule exist in the chain?" Although, if you check out the rule, we use that rule, and if you compare it with the rule above over there, that's pretty much the same one. It just append is now delete, right? And iptables doesn't find it, for God's sake, and I have no idea why, but it doesn't work. So, okay, let me just run it again, because that's not exactly the bug I wanted to show you. We'll do it again, I guess. Okay, should be ready. Let's run it. Done. Now it should get unhealthy. Okay, waiting. All right, unhealthy. Blah blah blah. That was the most common bug you could see with users using port forwarding. And there we go. And the whole program shuts down. So if it's unhealthy, the VPN, after a few seconds, decides to stop and to restart, which is fine. It's expected to behave like this. And the port forwarding is also stopping. And it's stopping because we want to restart it from the start, because the port forwarder is likely going to be different with a different VPN server. Maybe not, maybe yes, depending on the provider, but it's meant to do that. Now the thing is, to stop the port forwarding, we need to remove the previously allowed port 51,000, right? And we run these commands to delete that port from that rule from the firewall, because we don't want to accumulate a bunch of ports we don't need in the input chain. That's also a security hole. So the problem is that IP tables, the deleting part doesn't work because it doesn't find the rule. Okay, so that was pretty big. And then instead of auto healing internally, if you use port forwarding, it would just crash the entire program, and you would have to restart the container manually, or restart your connected containers to it. Blah blah blah. So quite a bit of a hassle. Now let me show you something. I'm running the container again. Proton VPN is pretty going to hate me for disconnecting and connecting every 10 seconds, but that's fine. Okay, so if we exec in the Gluetun container and we list all the rules like this, okay, we can see the rules, for example, we want to delete are these two, right? Once port forwarding goes down, right? And if you add a flag called --line numbers, there's a new column called num at the start. And this is the line number in the chain of every rule. So the two rules we want to delete here, once port forwarding gets stopped, is line number 4 and line number 5. And how do you delete those? So just for context, I'm going to show you. So if you do delete input, that was the previous way. We would just use that command, right? Delete the input, delete from the input chain, and then try to match so with different flags. So that was on the tune interface and protocol TCP, matching with TCP, and destination port 51216. It doesn't work. What a shame. It doesn't work, but if you do replace all this and put line number 4, it works perfectly. You can even list everything again. Where was it? Gluetun, IP tables, NVL. And yeah, it's no longer there. So what we figured out, kind of randomly to be honest, is that deleting by line number is reliable and it works systematically. But deleting and trying to rely on IP tables to match an existing rule with given flags is very unreliable. So, and this has been new, by the way. Like, this is since Alpine 3.19, so it has been, I don't know, 6 months or a year or something. It has been unreliable, but it wasn't before. It was working fine before. So anyway, so going back to the fix. The fix. Okay, so delete chain rules by line number. So now I think you understand better what this is. What we do with this big 1172 new lines pull request is that we pass, let me show you, we pass all the code, all the text output here is passed into Gluetun by custom code we wrote. And now we use our own code to find a certain rule and find the line number for that rule, and then we delete that rule using the line number. Okay, so all this is just pretty much a big blob of parsing and understanding the rules. And this has proven to be pretty stable now. It has been a few weeks it's running and works pretty well. So yeah, it looks like we're going to keep this approach and not rely on IP tables matching rules. Okay, that's pretty much it for the firewall fix. That was the pretty much the biggest fix of this release. And let's move on to the next one. The next one is about the control server. So this has been an issue that had a lot of activity and discussion on how to best fix this. But essentially, we can roughly summarize it with that vulnerable routes now require authentication and they are not public anymore. It's quite a bit more complicated than this. But anyway, so the reason for this is that there are some routes that are not really sensitive. For example, if you want to get the port forwarded from the API control server, the control server API, it's not a big deal. But there are some routes where you can get your credentials, for example, and these are sensitive, right? And before that, everything was public, and I was just relying on users to set up authentication themselves. If they wanted, they could set up a reverse proxy. But this, in the end, I don't think many people would do it because it was quite a hassle to set up. And another problem is that you have all these programs or containers or scripts or whatever connected to Gluetun, and most of the time they're connected through Gluetun, so they are on the same host, and they can access the control server port. So you could have a malicious container connected to Gluetun, which can try to steal all your credentials, for example, with those sensitive endpoints, right? So, okay, so initially we wanted to, change everything and make everything private by default. And if you want to access anything, you need to set up authentication. But compatibility is quite a big thing I like to maintain with Gluetun. So we're doing a bit of both worlds in such way that the very sensitive routes are now protected by default. They are not accessible, but most routes are not that sensitive and they are kept public for the time being, but they will be private in after the v3.41 release. So all this, don't worry about it, is written in the wiki. So if you go in the setup/advanced/control server.md, there's a page on the control server, and there's also a little warning saying, yeah, if you use release before v3.39.1, make sure you choose whatever is accessing the control server because it's exposed, right? And now there's a section. The section was existing before, but it was kind of not great. But now it's pretty great, I think. So it's a section about authentication. So it says, oh sorry, v3.40.0 release. So after the next release v3.40 will still be the same, but then after that, on the latest image and the v3.41 release, all routes will be private by default, and you will need to set up authentication to access any of them. So the way it works, I try to make it as dumb as possible and as simple as possible because I know setting up authentication is a pain in the ass. I'll hate it as well. So, okay, so you just create a file anywhere you want, config.toml. I use tom because toml is fun, I guess. And it's a role-based authentication. So here's an example. We create a role with name qubittorrent. We list the route. So first you put the HTTP verb. Usually it's a get or post, I guess. And then you put the path, the API path. So for example here, if qubittorrent needs to access the port forwarded, yeah, we just list that route, and you can list multiple routes with commas. This is an array of strings, so you can have multiple routes. And here you define the authentication. So here is basic authentication with a username and password. You can add more roles, obviously. It's written here. And for now, there are 3 authentication mechanisms. I think they're written here. So there's none, where it's basically public. Don't recommend it, but if you don't care, you can set none. Basic is the one we've seen with username and password, and API key, where it's a key you send in the HTTP header as x-api-key, and you set it with this. Okay, you can also generate a key, a cryptographically secure random key with this command. And okay, so going back to the instructions, so you create that little file config.toml, and then you bind mount it to gluetun/auth/config.toml in the container. You can also change the file path if you want for whatever odd reason, and you restart the container, and this will take effect. Okay. Now, most of you will probably skip over this. So if you don't care, don't want, are lazy, here's the default behavior. If you don't create an authentication configuration file, you fall into this category. Okay. And by the way, if you define an authentication configuration file, that means you know how authentication works. So all the server routes are now private by default, right? And any route that is not defined in that authentication configuration file will be private. Okay. Okay, so if you don't have any authentication configuration file specified, okay, so we have new routes, existing and undocumented routes, and existing documented and sensitive routes are private by default. You cannot access them. You need to define them in the authentication configuration for them to be accessible. Okay, so this feels like a reasonable breaking change, but for security purposes. Okay, so new routes, well, they're new, so yeah, they should be secure by default. Existing and undocumented, they were not documented, so it's on you if you were using them. Now they are private by default. And existing, documented, and sensitive routes. So there's one, for example, which is called, what is it called? Yeah, this one. If you get /v1/OpenVPN/settings, you get all your OpenVPN settings, including your username and password for OpenVPN. So this one is a existing, documented, and sensitive route. Okay, so you don't want this one to be a public by default. It's private by default now. Okay, where was I? Okay, but on the other hand, existing, documented, and non-sensitive routes, such as the port forwarded routes, are still publicly accessible, so you don't need to change anything. But after the v3.40 release, which will happen in 1 or 2 months, I think, then it will become, everything will become private by default. Okay. What else? That's pretty much it, I think. There's also a little warning logged, so you know that you should migrate to use authentication. If you don't have an authentication configuration file specified, and you access a route that is still public, but it will be private in the future, then a warning is logged in Gluetun so that you can know that you should migrate. Okay, that's pretty much it for the control server. Next is one for NordVPN, which is pretty simple. It consists in just removing commas from region values. So what does that mean? Again, this is a big TLDR and doesn't explain much, but essentially there were some regions, such as, let me show you real quick, such as Africa, the Middle East, and India. And because Gluetun works with comma-separated values to specify several regions, if you would put this value in Gluetun, it would take it as Africa, one region, and then space the Middle East and India as the second region. And obviously, neither do Africa or the Middle East and India are valid regions in the Gluetun server's data. So that wouldn't work, and you couldn't use the region filter. So now this is fixed by, guess what? Removing the comma. So pretty simple fix. But now, yeah, you can finally use the separate regions filter with NordVPN, I think. Yeah. Yep. Anyway, I think it's it's quite odd. It looks like it's only Africa, the Middle East, and India for all the servers, but yeah, I think that was the only region with a comma. The other regions didn't have a comma. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Yay. Next one is iVPN. Uh, Pretty much the same thing as NordVPN this time, except that the city field had, I can show you right there, had a comma, and where they would specify a city and a region after the comma. So now instead of plugging in the city from the data directly into the city, we split it in city and region with the pass city little function. The pass city little function here just splits it what's before the comma and what's after the comma. And yep, that's pretty much it. So for example, let's see. We have Ashburn. Well, okay, no, wait, no, that's not the. Well, let's say Ashburn, VA. Now, Ashburn is going to be the city, and VA is going to be the region, right? Same thing, for example, here we have Phoenix as a city, and the region is Arizona, AZ, right? Whereas before it was just Phoenix, AZ, and that wouldn't work as well with Gluetun because we use comma separated values for server filters. So yeah, that's a great little fix, and now you can use the server city filter correctly, and you can also use a new filter, server regions, if you want to. Okay. Next one is for private internet access. So private internet access is a bit of a pain to maintain and to support with WireGuard because they have an extremely weird and odd API system and all that. It's really a pain. But anyway, we can use WireGuard using the custom provider specifying a WireGuard configuration file. The problem is port forwarding with Gluetun and WireGuard would not work with private internet access. So the funny thing is that it would work perfectly fine with OpenVPN. OpenVPN, which by the way is natively supported in Gluetun with private internet access. But with WireGuard, it would not. The reason was... okay, so the reason was... let me show you... that, okay, for OpenVPN, and before that bug fix release, we would use the VPN gateway IP address to reach out to the private internet access API server to ask for the port to be forwarded, right? And that didn't work with WireGuard. So the VPN gateway IP address with WireGuard was not where the API server was. Unlike OpenVPN. And that took us a while to understand what the hell was going on because that was such a weird thing. And in the end, kind of randomly, I think I found it out that with another person that helped me figure this out as well, to be honest. And so basically, the API location of the private internet access API server location, IP address location, can be built always the same by using, okay, so we use the first 2 bytes of the gateway IP address. So, okay, let me show you. Okay, let's clear this. So let's say our gateway IP address, for example, is this, okay? Now, you take the first 2 bytes, so 56.77, so the first 2 numbers, I guess, and the 2 last numbers are always 128.1. We have no clue why, but it works all the time. so the API server is always that. And it works, this is the funniest thing as well, is that it works always as well with OpenVPN. So it seems like there are 2 IP addresses. On OpenVPN, you can reach it out on this IP address and this IP address as well. Whereas on WireGuard, you can only access it on this IP address. No idea why, but it works. So problem solved. Yeah, pretty much it. It was a pretty simple code fix, but quite a hassle to figure out what the hell is going on. It's very not documented on private internet access side, so shame on you, shame on you. All right, cool. Next one, pretty simple, is for Proton VPN. There was a user complaining that the Gluetun would complain that it would not find any server given the filters, and because he was setting free only and port forward only, and there's no port forwarding enabled VPN servers that are free on Proton VPN, and that was not really explained by Gluetun. So this is just a little fix slash feature, I guess, that explains better. Um, if you use Proton VPN and you set the free only filter and the port forward only, it will give an error saying, "Oh, this doesn't work with the free only filter." So it won't be as obscure as before. So a pretty simple fix. And last fix is also a pretty simple fix. It's just adding some missing selection fields to build a nice error about why we didn't find any server. So this is kind of related to the previous one where a user was complaining, because if you look up at the missing fields, so we are missing the stream only, multi-hop only, port forward only. So that's why the user was confused, because the error message would not mention the port forwarding only part as well, and secure core only, Tor only, and yeah, if we set a target IP address, it adds it to the message. So the message is just more complete, I guess. A really tiny fix, but it's nice quality of life in case you're not configured correctly, right? And I think that is all for this release. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it wasn't too long. And I will see you for next release. Bye!